Big Daddy's drill is iconic, so let's make it with this. This sheet is going to become the actual head of the drill. So to do that, I'm marking out all these lines in a triangle pattern. This way they'll fold together into a cone. Then I grab my circular saw and I try to cut these out, but it doesn't go so well, so let's find something else. The table saw is always a good option. To use it, I cut this wedge piece that I'm putting in between the sheet and the fence. This way it gives each piece the taper I'm looking for. This is what each of our pieces will look like, and if we look down the end, we can see that there's a slight angle on each side. With all of them cut up, it's time to tape it now. I'm taping on the thicker side that I'll then fold around to create a cone. Now it's just glue, but how do I get glue in here? Well, the easiest way I see it is you just take a jug of glue and you do a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of finger painting, and now the whole thing's covered in glue. Now we just need to struggle to try to fold it together and try maybe some staples will help, but it doesn't really do much. So then we tape it the best we can, and I guess it turned out alright. So now we'll just leave it for tomorrow, and hopefully it dries okay. Tomorrow comes, and it's not in 20 pieces, so it's better than it could have been. So I'm taking the sander to it to just shave down some of those high spots and make it rounder. After that, I'm just going to chuck a bit of filler at it, and I also add this bottom plate to try to keep it all together better. I also create the second plate that a dowel should be able to fit right into. That's because I hope to get this thing spinning, but we'll see. With the cone shape done, what's a drill without its spiral, teeth, whatever you want to call it, I don't know what it is, but you know what I'm saying. The thing that wraps around it. Start by marking the circle, and mark a few more circles inside, and then connect it into a spiraling pattern. With the pattern done, I bring over my jigsaw to try to cut this out as cleanly as possible, and if I'm being honest, I think that it turned out pretty good. So now all that's left is just draping it over the cone shape, which I start to pull down. It's looking pretty good until... So yeah, I'm gonna need to find something else. If wood won't work, why not plastic? Take it to my table saw to cut partway through the whole length, then use my heat gun to try to bend it all flat, which I'll then wrap around the cone shape of the drill. Yeah, this whole thing just ended up looking terrible. I don't know if it was my technique, but it's all creased and bad looking. There is one more option I can think of. There's metal, you know, the stuff drills are normally made out of. Well, we just start the same process, mark out our pattern across the whole thing and try to cut it. And now we have this weird looking slinky, but wrapped around the drill, I think that it looks pretty good. Okay, it may not be the best. If you look closely, you can see all of these little gaps, but there is ways to fix that. It's called a whole lot of Bondo. I basically smeared the whole thing up and down with it, but it made it pretty strong as well as filling those gaps to the point where I can pick it up, shake it, and it won't come loose. So I think it's good. Leaving that aside to start on the base, we can see that the drill itself is made up of just a whole ton of circles. Maybe weird circles, but still circles nonetheless. Well, circles and cylinders we've done many times before, so I'm just going to cut a ton of pieces at an angle, then use my miter sled to cut a ton of repeated cuts at the same exact heights. And just like that, I have over 100 pieces to fold. So I'm going to quickly do a dry check to make sure all my measurements are right, and yeah, that seems pretty good. This one as well looks to be the right size, but this one just completely wrong. It's only half of it, but it's just way too big, so something's wrong here. So after days of running the numbers, I figured out I failed first grade math because for some reason on this circle, I calculated area instead of circumference. So after cutting these pieces down, I got my 5 circles glued up. Except this one, that for some reason split right down the center. So after gluing that back up and then sanding them all down, I now have my 5 perfect circles. Now for this cogged wheel on top. I'm thinking that if I take some of my scrap pieces, cut them into short lengths, I should be able to place them all around the piece, but put a slight angle on it. I could then pin them all on and use a spacer block. That way, they would all be equal distance apart from each other, as well as keeping the same angle across each one. Well, that sets, I'm going to start cutting some thin dowels and some thick dowels. The thin dowels are going to become these pipes that are running down the drill, and the thick ones become these shock absorber things that are on the side. I'm going to use some more off-cut scrap that are going to go in between our shock absorber pieces, kind of like this. Then to create the spring look on the shock, I basically mounted my miter sled at a fixed point and rotate the piece around the blade, Gonna do this at a few different distances to create that look, then take my router and router at the end to round it over and add a cap, and this should be the look of our finished shocks. With those done, I can now mount them onto the actual pieces going around my arms. This will finally start our base for this thing. I then take all these small dowels and do the same thing, mounting them all evenly spaced across the arm. Looking back at our book, there's this little piece that's right above the cog, so I'm gonna go on to making that next. This is my piece. I marked out all these little swoops in it, which are a bit hard to see on camera, but I just gotta cut those up. Okay, the thing exploded into like 10 pieces, so I'm just gonna glue it up, tape it, and hope that sets right. Well, that hopefully repairs itself. I'm gonna move on to all these little gears around the drill. To do that, I'm cutting up a ton of these pieces, gluing them up together for the bigger ones, and then do a whole lot of marking on each of them. I use my bandsaw and sander to round all these gears, and I'm gonna start with these smaller ones by cutting in the teeth. I'm using my rotary tool to do this, and then I'm taking it to the back side of it to add a bevel on it. This is what it'll look like. The larger gears are a bit more troublesome. Because they have that extra detail and are stepped, I need to play this back and forth game between using my chisel to bring it down, but then using the rotary tool to make sure that I still keep the area the teeth are supposed to be in. It's a lot of back and forth and tedious work, but it works out. Our exploded ring is back, so I cut all these swoops in it and sanded it up. Now I try mounting it on, but it's a bit too big, so I cut spacers to fit in between to make the fit tight. Next I cut another piece that's going to slide tightly into there. The idea with this is that attached to the drill I have this 4.5 piece and a 4.5 inch hole saw. Okay, the hole saw is actually 4.25, so this isn't going to fit anymore. So I guess I gotta figure out a way to get that to fit. Either way, the idea is for these two pieces to slide nicely together and to create a more stable point. I want this small gap in between, so to do that, I've added this little spacer piece. And you may say, wow, that's the most ugliest thing I've ever seen. And to that I would say, well, there's a reason I don't show my face. But either way, the point is that this is going to be covered and no one's going to actually see it, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. With that done, I'm going to move on to clamping and gluing the whole base together. This will make our base solid, and now it's onto the drill head. I want to try to get this rod to go right through the center and out, so I'm going to just load it up with epoxy, nail it, hopefully that sticks. If you're wondering why the angle was a bit odd, it's because I'm literally using my tripod not only to film, but to hold this whole thing up. So I let the epoxy set, and then I tried testing it, and it ripped out immediately, so that didn't work at all. So instead, I cut this little square part that's going to fit right into that circle and perfectly center it, and then made this dowel that I turned down so a drill chuck can fit onto it. I'm just going to try gluing this with some high quality glue, screwing it in, and hopefully that'll be stable enough for it. Okay, that didn't work either, but I'm fed up with the spinning part, so I'm just going to start painting. I'm going to start by just priming both the base and the drill head. Then I'm going to spray it with a silver metallic color as a base, except this top piece here is actually a brass color. So I'm going to tape off the whole thing, spray it down, and it's all good now. Next is the most hard, but also one of the most satisfying parts of painting, which is weathering and texture. The issue is, if you're a little too light, you don't see it, but if you're too dark, it's too noticeable. As well as you're trying to systematically make a random process, which can be difficult. So to do this, I'm taking acrylics and watering them down a lot, so I barely get any pigment on the piece. And then I'm trying to go over more of the ridges, more heavy, so that way the darkness sticks into those parts to try to mimic reality. Now I'm just going to leave this on the table for a few days, and if we wait long enough, eventually we should see the whole piece has now developed a layer of rust across it. The last thing that I want to try doing is add a blood splatter across this whole thing. So to do that, I'm basically drenching my paintbrush in as much red paint as I can, and then flicking it over and over and over again across the whole piece. And with paint flying literally all over my garage and me, that should finish this build. Well, with that, our project is done. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. Also, leave a comment about anything you want to see me build next. And with that, I'm gone. Goodbye.